Hey everybody, welcome back to the ECG channel. My name is Reid, and don't forget that before we get going, you can download the PDF of today's ECG document down, linked in the description below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you enjoy this content. So, alrighty, let's jump into the ECG. So the first thing I like to do is look at the forest, and the trees of the forest are my QRSs. So I might go down here to lead 2. I see I've got a narrow complex rhythm. Seems to be pretty regular, and it goes somewhat regular. Maybe this one's a little early, perhaps. It's hard to say. We definitely know that this is early, so we've got maybe a few early beats. Otherwise, the rhythm is narrow, right? We're on that kind of lower or upper limit of normal. My QRS here, I would say, is maybe 110 milliseconds, so less than 120. So narrow complex rhythm. And if you look closely, we see we've got P waves. So seems to be kind of on par with what we would expect, right? Other than these early beats. So let's go through our algorithm. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at our atrial activity. We're going to look at that P wave. If we look, the P wave is upright in lead 1 and upright in AVF. So that tells me that my P wave is going down and to the left, which is common if it comes from my sinus nodes. We've got a sinus P wave. The next thing is our AV node. We look at our AV node via the PR interval, right? That's what gives us our insight into what's going on. If you look at the beginning of the P wave to the beginning of the QRS, my PR interval is about 4 small boxes. So PR here is 160 milliseconds, which is normal. We now need to make sure that there's 1 P wave per 1 QRS, because if there's any extra P waves, then we're in different type of AV block. And so I look kind of on the baseline here. I look for any extra P waves. I don't see any extra P waves. I scan through, so I don't see any. So, okay. Normal AV node function. Let's look at our QRS complexes. Our QRSs, we said were narrow, right? And we've got an axis that is isoelectric in lead 2. So what does isoelectric mean? If lead 2 is right here, isoelectric means that we're perpendicular to lead 2 for our axis. So somewhere along this, right, when AVL is perpendicular to lead 2. So that's our perpendicular 90-degree mark. And since we're positive in AVL, we know that our axis is going in that direction. So that's our QRS axis, right? Right at about negative 30 degrees, okay? So right on the border of left axis deviation, left axis shift, but regardless, the axis is shifted left, right? Our axis is definitely shifted to the left, right? What are causes of a left axis type of shift with a narrow complex rhythm? I think of maybe left ventricular hypertrophy, right? If my left ventricular myocardium is really bulky, then we'll draw a signal that direction. And so one of the ways we can do it is we can look and we can measure the R wave in AVL and determine if it's above, if the R is greater than 11 millimeters in AVL, then that's criteria. So I start here, I see that it's right on that second line, and then this up here is kind of right on the third line. So this is actually like right at 11 millimeters. So I would say we can call this borderline LVH, right? We'll say the left ventricle is definitely not small, right? That's okay, right? This is just an ECG, right? We can get an echo if we need to. Alrighty, so we've got that. What else do we see? Well, I look up here in V1 because I know that we need to see good R wave progression, right? We need to see nice R wave progression. And what I see is I see a little bit of an R prime. I see an R prime here, right? And you can see in V2 you've got a little RSR prime. You can see in V3 RSR prime. That was a bad drawing. RSR prime, right? And so that R prime that we're seeing throughout these leads is evidence of an incomplete right bundle branch block, right? Right bundle branch blocks notoriously have late forces going toward the right ventricle, right? So you get a little itty bitty bit of slurring here in the lateral forces. See that little slur? Yeah, that's what we're seeing there, right? You can even see just a little bit in lead 1. It's incomplete because the QRS is still narrow, right? So a complete right bundle branch block requires a wide complex QRS, but here we have a narrow complex QRS with that right bundle branch block type of morphology, type of conduction, late forces. So we have just a little bit of a right bundle branch block, incomplete block. Alrighty, so we've done that. Let's take a look at our QT interval, right? I can just look in between 2 R to Rs, maybe this one, And you can see my QT, if I look kind of right down the middle, my T wave ends definitely by the midway point, so good QT interval. I look for any pathological Q waves or ST and T wave changes. You know, maybe this person's had a prior septal MI, right? Look at, maybe, I'll do it in a different color. Maybe you look here, maybe some pathological Q waves in those septal leads. So I would say, potentially, a previous, we'll say a previous septal MI. And that would explain a little bit about why our right bundle branch block our right bundle is a little bit blocked, right? Because the right bundle follows the right side of that septum. So maybe the right bundle just got kind of damaged, right? So we'll correlate all this stuff clinically, right? Echo, stress testing, all sorts of great ways to correlate this. This is just the ECG. But I don't see any active ST or T wave changes throughout that are really worrisome. And so now I kind of turn to these early beats, right? And so I look maybe at this one, and I see it's a narrow complex QRS that's the same morphology as the normal QRS. And I look in front of it, and I see that I've got a P wave. And so when we see a QRS that occurs early, and there's a P wave, and that P wave, if you look at other leads, is a little bit different than the normal P wave. This is kind of the normal P wave, and this one looks just a little different, right? So I would say this is a premature atrial contraction, right? These are ectopic P waves that occur early, right? So those are ectopic P waves, premature atrial contractions, right? Maybe this is one too, right? Maybe this is another PAC. You could probably see it better here. Actually here, I think AVF is the best lead, right? So look at the previous normal sinus P wave. Right, here's my sinus P wave. But then here's a little bit of that. This is the early beat that we care about. And so we kind of look up here and look at this P wave. It's a little different. Yeah, so maybe some subtle premature atrial contraction that's coming from somewhere around the vicinity of the sinus node, making a very similar looking P wave. So let's put this all together. What do we have? We have a sinus rhythm. What is our rate? Well, we didn't even calculate the rate. Let's do that now. Here's our solid line QRS. We've got 300, 150, 100, 75, 60, just under 60, probably 55 beats per minute. So what do we have? We've got a sinus bradycardia. Alrighty, we've got a sinus bradycardia. We've got borderline left ventricular hypertrophy with an incomplete right bundle branch block as well. Potentially a prior septal MI with some subtle septal Q waves and 2 premature atrial contractions. So I hope this helps you kind of work through these strips, right? Correlating things anatomically and physiologically, right? The incomplete right bundle branch block, well, why? Well, maybe it's a septal MI that we're seeing, right? Why is the axis shifted left? Maybe it's because we've got borderline LVH. So kind of work through in your mind, why would this be caused anatomically, and you will be less likely to miss these things. So hope this helps. If you have any questions, put them down in the comments, and if not, thanks so much for watching. See you on the next ECG video. Have a great rest of your day. Take care.